I painted my house a calm, neutral gray-green. 3 days later, I got fined $250 for non-compliant color. So I asked for their official guide, and what I did next made the neighborhood panic. So, where are you watching from? Hopefully somewhere safer than my neighborhood? Drop it in the comments. And if chaotic suburban drama is your thing, hit that subscribe button. I moved in on a Tuesday. Quiet street, clean lawns, every house more or less the same, beige, tan, off-white. Nothing offensive, nothing special. Just safe. I didn't mind. I wasn't trying to make a statement, I just wanted a home I could relax in. Something neutral, calm. So I painted mine a soft gray with a greenish tint. Like sage, almost. It blended in with the trees behind the fence, looked great in the morning light. I thought it looked peaceful. Turns out, peaceful wasn't on the HOA-approved palette. 3 days after the final coat dried, there it was. A bright orange notice taped to my door right at eye level. Thick paper, heavy font, big block letters, color violation, non-compliant shade. Fine, $250. Due immediately, no warning, no knock, no neighborly chat, just a fine. Because my house was apparently the wrong kind of green. At first, I thought it was a mistake, so I called the number listed at the bottom. Took 5 minutes to get through to someone, and when I finally did, she sounded bored. The architectural committee found your home's exterior to be out of compliance with approved shades, she said flatly. I asked her what the approved shades were. She sighed. They're in the design compliance booklet. You should have received a copy at closing. I hadn't. I said so. She said I could request one in writing. So I did. And while I waited, I walked the block, just to be sure. 7 beige homes, 2 tan, 1 light peach, a white one with trim that looked like old oatmeal. And mine, the only house with any actual color. It hit me then. This wasn't about being out of bounds. It was about standing out. That night I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the violation notice, thinking about how much of my own money I'd spent repainting that house, how little they cared, how quickly they decided I was a problem. And I started to wonder, if I was going to get fined for having the wrong color, what exactly were the right ones? The next morning I got a heavy envelope in the mail. The return address, HOA Design Review Office. Inside, the official HOA color guide. It had a glossy cover and just 13 colors inside, all of them beige. And that's when something in me shifted. I looked at those samples, smiled to myself, and thought, maybe it's time to repaint, but not the way they expect. The booklet was heavier than I expected. Glossy cover, gold-stamped lettering that read, Harmony Through Design, HOA-approved exterior colors. It looked more like a wedding invitation than a rule book. Inside were color swatches, each on its own page, like they deserved space to breathe. 13 colors total. Every single one, beige. With names like Desert Mist, Almond Cream, Toasted Linen, and my personal favorite, Earth and Silence. They weren't even that different. Hold them side by side and you'd be forgiven for thinking they were the same, just slightly warmer or cooler versions of bland. I flipped through it twice just to be sure I wasn't missing a second section. Maybe pastels, earth tones, anything? Nope. 13 shades of beige. That was it. That night I held the booklet under the kitchen light and lined up the samples next to the color on my own walls. Mine wasn't even that far off, just had a hint of green. But clearly, that hint was enough to offend the HOA's sense of harmony. What bothered me most wasn't the limit. It was the message. Conformity at all costs. I thought about repainting, going with something on their list, just to avoid more fines, just to move on. But then I imagined standing on a ladder, covering up something I liked with a shade called Whispered Sand. And I couldn't do it. That night I started looking up alternative paints, not just colors, ideas, military designs, optical illusions, urban camouflage patterns, tree bark textures. I found a whole subreddit about camouflaging buildings for art installations and forest cabins. One post showed a cabin so perfectly painted it practically disappeared into the trees, and something about that made me grin. Not angry, not petty, just inspired. I didn't want to break the rules. I wanted to bend them. Show them what happens when you follow the rules creatively. So I printed out every color swatch from the booklet, laid them on my counter, and pulled out a pencil. Started sketching ideas on a napkin. I didn't know yet if I could pull it off, but I knew I wanted to try. Next morning, I drove to the hardware store, and I left with 6 gallons of paint, none of which had names, just numbers, and every one of them matched something in nature. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was angry. I'd already moved past that. What I felt was something else, like I was waking up inside my own story. Like I'd just realized, oh, this isn't just a house. This is a stage. And apparently, I'm supposed to follow a script I never agreed to. The paint cans sat by the front door, unopened, 6 of them, all muted earth tones, forest gray, dusty green, stone brown, no labels, just numbers on the lids. The colors looked like they'd been scraped off tree bark and river rock. I stood there with my coffee and thought, if beige is harmony, then what's camouflage? What if I didn't try to stand out, but vanish? It wasn't about rebellion. Not really. I wasn't planning to paint flames or graffiti or giant murals of middle fingers. I just wanted to ask a quiet question. What happens when you follow the rules? Creatively. So I started sketching, not on paper, on the walls, with chalk. I marked the places where shadow hit in the morning. I studied how the fence cast lines across the siding in the afternoon. I noted which windows reflected the trees and which ones caught the sky. Then I went back inside and pulled up my old hiking photos. Close-ups of lichen, moss, cracked wood, rusted rock. I made a color map, not by code, but by feeling. It took 3 days to finalize the pattern. I taped it off, one shape at a time. Nothing harsh, just patches, curves, blends, like soft puzzle pieces of nature. I didn't even touch the trim, left the windows alone. It wasn't a full repaint, just texture, depth, layers. From a distance, the house still looked calm. But as you got closer, the details pulled you in. Bark, shadow, fog, branches. And if you looked long enough, the house started to fade, not into the background, but into the earth. By the 4th day, a couple neighbors slowed down as they walked past. I saw one of them pause and tilt their head like they weren't sure what had changed. The house looked quieter, more still, like it had been there forever. I didn't say anything, just waved. They waved back. But later that night, someone knocked once and left without waiting. On the doorstep was a folded piece of paper, no envelope, just one sentence: "You need to stop now."
People think HOAs are about rules. They're not. They're about trust. People buy homes here because they want to feel safe, not just physically, but visually. Predictable colors, tidy lawns, clean sidewalks, no surprises. That's what we promise. That's why I joined the architectural committee, not because I enjoy saying no, but because someone has to maintain the standard. If we let things slip, everything goes downhill. It always does. I noticed the house right away. The new one. They'd only just moved in, but the paint was still wet. And it wasn't beige, not even trying to be. It wasn't ugly exactly. That would have been easier. But this was something else. A cool, greenish gray. So subtle it almost worked, and that made it worse. Because if that was allowed, what next? People need boundaries. It's comforting. They may not say it, but they appreciate knowing what's acceptable. So I flagged the violation. Standard process, no emotion, just enforcement. But then they requested the design compliance booklet. That's never a good sign. People who ask for the booklet aren't looking to fix anything. They're looking to challenge. They want to push the edges, exploit the language, find the gap between beige and barely. That's how things unravel. Still, I mailed it. Let them see for themselves. 13 approved colors, carefully selected. professionally named. There's nothing oppressive about it. There's freedom within the boundaries. That's what people forget. The next time I saw that house, a delivery truck was parked outside. No logo, just plain white. And from the back came paint cans. Not one of them beige. I watched from the window. They didn't look panicked or defiant. They looked calm, like they knew exactly what they were doing. That's the worst kind, the quiet ones, the ones who think they're clever. I made a note in my ledger, their name, their lot number, the delivery date, just facts. No judgment. And yet something about it stayed with me. Not fear, not anger, but a sense of disturbance. Like when you walk into a room and something's just slightly off. A picture frame tilted. A shadow where it doesn't belong. They think this is about paint, but it never is.
I walk the neighborhood every morning. Same loop, same time. Just me, my earbuds, and the sidewalk. It's quiet here. That's why I moved in. People keep to themselves. Nothing loud, nothing strange. So when I saw the house changing, I noticed. Not right away. At first I just thought, new paint. Didn't even stop walking. But then the edges shifted. The walls started to blend into the trees behind them. Not in a dramatic way. No neon, no murals. Just shadows. Movement. Like the house had learned to breathe with the light. It was subtle. And somehow, that made it feel deliberate. By day 3, I started slowing down when I passed. There was a pattern to it, a flow, like someone had studied how the world looked at different times of day, and then painted that. I'm not part of the HOA, never wanted to be, but I get the appeal. Structure, guidelines, peace of mind. I've seen what happens when nobody's in charge. It gets messy. But this didn't feel messy. It felt thoughtful. I know Karen's watching. Her blinds are angled just enough to pretend she's not. She doesn't say much, but I can feel the tension, like a coiled wire between her porch and his front step. The other day I passed her while she was clipping her hedge. She didn't say hi, just asked, "Have you seen the house on Cedar?" I said, "Yeah, looked good." She squinted at me like I'd failed some kind of test. That night I walked the loop a second time, just to be sure. A couple other neighbors had their porch lights on, lingering, watching, not saying anything, but they saw it too. The change, the shift. And when I got home, I found myself opening my phone, took a quick photo from the sidewalk, no caption, just posted it to my private story. A few minutes later, someone messaged me. "Where is this? Is this real? Is this allowed?" That's actually kind of genius. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked back to the window, looked out at the camouflaged walls catching the last of the sunset, and thought, maybe this isn't just about paint. Maybe it's about what happens when one person quietly refuses to be beige. And then I hit send. Not just the photo, the story, the whole thing, to someone who knows how to make things visible.
I started early, just after sunrise, before the street filled with dog walkers and lawn mowers and leaf blowers. The first brushstroke was almost silent, a deep green-gray sweeping across the upper west wall, right where the shade from the oak tree settled in the morning. It wasn't dramatic. No big reveal, just a slow, steady shift in texture. I worked in layers, no straight lines. I let the shadows guide me. Where the fence cast a line, I followed it. Where light pooled around the corners, I deepened the tone. No two patches were exactly the same, but somehow it all fit. By mid-morning, someone stopped on the sidewalk. I kept painting. They didn't say anything. Just looked. That became the rhythm. Me, a ladder, and an audience I didn't invite. A rotating cast of neighbors walking slower than usual, some pretending to check their phones, others openly watching. One even took a photo, didn't even hide it. I didn't speak unless they did, but most didn't. It wasn't fear in their eyes. More like curiosity, like they were watching someone do something they didn't know was allowed. Karen didn't come by the first day, or the second, But on the third, I heard the tires before I saw her. Sharp turn, quick stop. Her SUV idled at the curb while I painted a soft blend of moss green around the back window trim. She didn't get out, just stared. I kept painting. After a full minute, she pulled away. No wave, no word. But later that afternoon, a new notice appeared. This one wasn't taped to the door. It was hand-delivered, left on the doormat, folded twice, with a red HOA seal stamped across the front. I didn't open it right away. I knew what it would say. Instead, I walked the perimeter of the house, took it in, the way the colors shifted with the sun, the way the house no longer popped, but settled, like it had grown there. I thought about the neighbors watching, about the photo making the rounds, about the way Karen's mouth tightened when she saw the walls. Then I picked up the notice, opened it, and read the first line. Cease exterior modifications immediately or face escalating penalties. There was a number to call. I didn't write it down. Instead, I went back to the wall, dipped the brush, and added one more stroke of bark brown, right across the seam where two beige houses met.
I don't like escalation. That's not what this committee is about. We exist to protect community standards, not to police creativity. People misunderstand that all the time. They think we care about the color itself. We don't. We care about precedent, because the moment one person bends the rules, even tastefully, others start asking questions. Can I do that? What if I do this? And suddenly, we're not a community anymore. We're a suggestion. That house was supposed to be easy. Out of compliance paint, straightforward violation. Send the letter, apply the fine. They repaint, done. But this one didn't fold. They got creative. Worse, they got attention. First the paint, then the patterns, and now the photos. I saw it on my niece's social feed. Someone had reposted it with the caption, Camouflage House HOA Drama, Absolute Legend. Legend? It's a violation, not a triumph. I've tried every official channel. The letters, the escalation warnings, the appeal process. They haven't responded to any of them, and now others are noticing, asking questions. What exactly counts as non-compliant? Is this really a big deal? Can I use sage green? It's unraveling. So I called a special board session. I brought copies of the violations, photos, timeline logs. I even printed the original paint order from the day their delivery was spotted. One board member raised an eyebrow. Another just said, honestly, it looks kind of cool. Cool? Is that where we are now? I sent a final notice, hand-delivered, formal, firm, legally worded. Cease all exterior modifications immediately or face fines up to $1,000 per day, backdated from the date of initial noncompliance. Failure to respond will result in legal escalation and potential lien action against the property. It's not personal, it's policy. If we don't enforce it now, we won't be able to enforce anything later. Still, I paused before sending it. There's something about the way that house looks now. The way it blends into the trees. The way the shadows move across the siding like it belongs to the land, not the block. Even I can see it's beautiful. But beautiful doesn't mean allowed. And admiration isn't compliance. So I closed the folder, sealed the envelope, and placed it on their doorstep myself. Let them read it. Let them understand. This is the last warning. And if they don't back down, we move to legal.
The notice sat on my counter all night. I didn't read it twice. Once was enough. The tone wasn't subtle anymore. They weren't asking. They were warning. Threatening, even. But I didn't respond. Not with words. I added another layer. A wash of pale green across the south wall, where the evening light filtered through the neighbor's maple. The kind of green that disappears just before dusk. And that was the stroke someone captured. Not a neighbor this time. A stranger. Someone passing by in a rideshare filming a TikTok about weird houses in rich neighborhoods. They slowed down, saw mine, and zoomed in, captioned it. This guy's painting his house camouflage to mess with his HOA. Absolute hero. The video hit 100,000 views in 12 hours. By morning it was everywhere. Reddit, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook moms groups, everyone had an opinion. Some called it genius, others asked if it was legal, a few accused me of ruining the neighborhood. But most just wanted to see what I'd do next. The real shift came when someone stitched the video with an overlay of the HOA's notice. Now it wasn't just a paint job. It was a fight, a quiet one. No yelling, no signs, just color and silence and stubborn, beautiful resistance. By midday, my inbox had 3 interview requests: local news, a podcast about housing rights, and someone claiming to be from a documentary series about creative non-compliance. I ignored them, not because I wasn't tempted, but because it wasn't finished yet. The house wasn't done, and I wasn't done. Instead, I pulled on my work shirt, stepped outside, and found a woman standing on the sidewalk with her phone out. She looked up. "You the guy with the paint?" I nodded. She smiled. "Respect." That's all she said. She didn't stay, didn't film, just kept walking. But it landed, not because she agreed with me, but because she saw me, not as a problem, but as a person. Later that night, I stood in the backyard, brush in hand, looking up at the wall I hadn't touched yet, the one that faced the park, just beyond the tree line. It was still blank, still beige, and suddenly that felt like the loudest wall of all. I dipped the brush into the darkest shade I had, lifted my arm, and started with the corner. The meeting wasn't supposed to be public, but someone shared the flyer. Then someone made a Reddit thread. By the time the HOA board gathered in the clubhouse, there were twice as many folding chairs as usual, and none of them were empty. I walked in quietly. No camera crew, no speech planned, just me, my hands in my pockets, and a room full of people who all somehow knew what this was really about. Karen was already seated. She didn't look at me. She looked at the binder in front of her, the same one she'd used to issue violations for overgrown shrubs, mismatched fences, and lawn ornaments shaped like frogs. The president of the board called the meeting to order, reviewed the agenda. Item 4, ongoing paint dispute, Lot 62. That was me. They asked if I'd like to speak. I didn't stand. I just leaned forward and said, "I painted my house to blend in. And now everyone's staring at it. That says more about the rules than it does about me." The room didn't applaud, but it didn't blink either. Karen cleared her throat. "The color is non-compliant. It's not on the approved list. That's all that matters." Someone 2 rows back raised their hand. "Who approved that list?" Karen hesitated. "The original board." "When?" 17 years ago. A ripple moved through the room. Another voice. "Can we change it?" Karen sat straighter. "That's not on the agenda." But the president leaned in. "It can be." And just like that, the ground shifted. People started talking. Not loud, not angry, just real. A couple said they actually liked the new look. One woman mentioned how her kids now call it the forest house. A man in a baseball cap said he thought about painting his shed a darker color to match the shade line behind it, but didn't because he didn't want to deal with a notice. And all Karen could say was, "But it's not beige." As if that were still enough. The board took a breath, said they'd table the vote, review the policy, maybe open the palette. "A color committee," someone suggested. Karen didn't respond. She just sat there, flipping the corner of a page back and forth with her finger. After the meeting, a guy I'd never met shook my hand in the parking lot. "You know," he said, "I never thought about painting my house until now." And I couldn't tell if that was a compliment or a warning. I wasn't planning to dig through the rules. Honestly, I thought I was done. Let them hold their meetings, form their committees, argue about what beige really means. But curiosity is a funny thing. That night, I pulled out the HOA documents from the welcome packet I almost threw away. Most of it was what you'd expect: bylaws, payment schedules, trash pickup times. But buried in the architectural guidelines, page 37, section 12, paragraph C, was a line I hadn't heard anyone mention. Exterior finishes must maintain visual cohesion with the natural surroundings unless otherwise approved. I read it twice, then a third time. Maintain visual cohesion with the natural surroundings. Not beige, not tan, nature. I sat back, stared at the ceiling, and smiled. My house didn't stand out. It blended. It echoed the trees, the soil, the stone. It was visually cohesive, more than any pale vinyl box on the block. I printed the page, circled the paragraph, typed up a short message. Per your own guidelines, I believe my paint scheme is not only compliant, it's exemplary. Attached 2 photos, one taken at sunset, one at midday. Then I hit send. No long explanations, no legal threats, just their own words reflected back. 2 days passed with no reply. Then a short email. Your appeal will be reviewed at the next board session. Pending review, further fines are paused. That was it. No apology, no agreement. But also, no escalation. And for the first time in weeks, it was quiet. I took a walk around the block. People nodded at me now. A few smiled. One guy asked what paint number I used on the west side. I didn't tell him. Back home, I looked at the wall that started it all. Sage green, soft, cool, unbothered. I hadn't painted in days. I didn't need to. The house looked finished. More than that, it looked certain. And for the first time since that first violation notice, I felt like I wasn't just reacting, I was holding the brush again. Then my phone buzzed. An email. Same HOA address, different subject line. Board response attached, motion filed. I opened it. And there, in clean, bold letters, was a proposal I hadn't seen coming. Motion to review and expand the official color guide in compliance with evolving design standards. They didn't say my name, but I could hear it between the lines. The next board meeting was different, not because of the chairs. They were the same metal fold-ups. Not because of the room, still fluorescent, still beige. But something had shifted. The board wasn't behind the table. They were among us, scattered, listening, not hiding behind policy binders. And Karen? She was still at the table, but she didn't open her folder this time. The president read the motion aloud. A proposal to review and expand the HOA exterior color guide in alignment with updated language from Section 12, Paragraph C. No drama, no commentary, just policy, catching up to the present. They opened the floor. A man in the back stood up, said he'd lived here 16 years, said he'd never cared about color until someone reminded him the world isn't just beige. A woman held up her phone, showed a photo of the camouflaged house at sunset, said it made her feel calm when she passed it, like it belonged. A teenager stood and said, "At least someone around here's trying something." Then it was quiet again. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The vote was called. One by one, hands went up. First the president, then 2 more, then a 4th. Karen didn't raise hers. She didn't speak at all. And when the vote passed, she didn't object. She just stood, picked up her folder, and left the room. No glares, no muttered threats, just left. That's when someone else, I don't know who, said quietly, "Do we have a process for removing a board member?" It wasn't said with anger, just curiosity, the way someone might ask about borrowing a ladder or trimming a tree. The president nodded slowly. "We do." The room didn't erupt. There was no applause. No one shouted. But everyone felt it. The order had shifted. Not broken, but bent, enough to let light in. Afterwards, someone brought cookies. Seriously. I stood by the door, holding a plastic cup of lemonade, listening to people talk about siding and tree trimming and shade options like they were planning a block party. Someone came up behind me and said, "So what's next?" I didn't turn around, just looked out the window at the edge of my house, the wall that had started it all. And I said, "I think I'm good with the color." But inside, I was already wondering what the shed might look like in slate gray. Things didn't change overnight. The color guide wasn't rewritten the next day. Karen didn't disappear. The HOA still existed, still sent emails, still had rules. But something in the air was different. People looked up when they passed each other. They waved more. talked more, like something had cracked open. Not in the system, but in the silence. A week after the vote, someone painted their shutters navy blue. No notice followed. A month later, a house 2 streets over added a terracotta front door. People liked it. One neighbor left a sticky note that just said, "Nice." Karen didn't speak at the next meeting. At the one after that, she wasn't there at all. Someone else had taken her seat. He wore sneakers and a Save the Bees pin. Said his day job was in urban design. He smiled a lot. As for me, I didn't repaint. Didn't need to. The house still faded into the trees like it was born there. The colors had softened with weather, blurred into the light. Some people didn't even notice it anymore. And honestly, I liked that. A few neighbors still asked about it, still wanted to know how I did it or what shade I used or where I got the idea. I just smiled and said, I matched it to the neighborhood. They usually laughed, but I meant it. Not the HOA version of the neighborhood, the real one. The wind in the trees, the moss on the sidewalk, the way the sun hits the fence just before dusk. The version no one ever included in a compliance booklet. Not everything stayed peaceful. There were still complaints, still arguments, still a committee. But it all felt a little less rigid now, a little more human. One evening I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee watching 2 kids ride bikes past the house. One of them pointed at my wall and said, "That one's my favorite." The other said, "You can barely see it." And I thought, exactly. Not every stand has to be loud. Sometimes the quiet ones echo the longest. But it still makes me wonder, how many neighborhoods live like we did? Quiet, beige, rule-bound, afraid to stand out, even a little? And how many are still waiting for someone to pick up a brush? Rules are meant to protect us. But sometimes, all they really protect is sameness. So where's your line? Would you follow the rules or paint your own way? What would you have done? Let me know in the comments. Blend in or quietly disappear.